Christmas is a holy time of year, and as we approach this 2,000-year-old holiday season, it's a special time where we come together as family. And what's fascinating is the story of Christmas. And today we're going to learn about that from an extraordinary book called Christmas in the Crosshairs by Dr. Gerry Bowler.
A clear path forward requires looking back and learning. Good public policy requires human connection. It's a consideration of the facts, applying common sense and innovation. It's urban, it's rural, it's real life. We all have something to contribute. We all have a responsibility to get informed because there's a little piece of Canada in all of us, isn't there? Let's learn on this path together. This is Leaders on the Frontier.
So with me here today is Dr. Gerry Bowler, who's the author of Christmas in the Crosshairs, and he's also a senior fellow at Frontier and a good friend. So welcome, Gerry.
Good to be here.
Gerry, it's great that you're here. I'm really excited about this story. I loved your book. It was very insightful, and frankly, I was kind of surprised by the story of Christmas. So I'm going to start off with a really basic question. Is there a war on Christmas?
The short answer is yes. A slightly longer answer is there's always been a war against Christmas. There's always been wars against Christmas.
Not just one, but many of them.
Many, and some of them simultaneous, but through the centuries that Christmas has been celebrated, there has been a parallel series of arguments, disagreements, bickerings, attempt to abolish the holiday. The fact is that Christmas is simply too important not to have attracted hostile interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess that's really the larger point of the book, is that between the atheists and the devout followers of Christmas, you have materialists, we have like every group imaginable. They just had to get at Christmas, didn't they? Given its scale and size.
It's too important. And you have to remember that the first attacks on Christmas come from within Christianity, that there were centuries of debating, first of all, if the Nativity of Jesus should be celebrated, and then when, and then how. So within Christianity, there's bubbled these questions for 1800 years. And then we get opponents from outside the faith, from other faiths, from materialist notions, political movements, all kinds of social movements. Christmas is too big a target to miss.
Well, it's a very interesting story. So speaking of the story, I want to begin with the beginning. And that is when Jesus was born. We had early Christianity, and you're a historian, obviously. But how did early Christians celebrate or mark the occasion of Christmas?
Well, at first they didn't. They were much too interested in the imminence of Jesus's return to bother much about the birth.
Mm-hmm.
The nativity stories appear in only two of the four Gospels. It's hardly mentioned at all in the rest of the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when Christianity is attacked by Gnostics who claim that Jesus did not come to earth in human form, but only appeared to, that the church has to begin emphasizing the reality of the Nativity, the bodily presence of Jesus,
mm-hmm.
the diapers,
mm-hmm.
the poor setting, the cold. And so starting probably really taking off in the 200s, the church decides, no, we've got to start talking about the reality of a human birth in Bethlehem during the time of Caesar Augustus.
Interesting.
When Christmas is decided upon to be celebrated, there were others that felt, sorry, Christians don't do birthdays, and we certainly don't want to imitate Herod, who had John the Baptist assassinated on his birthday. Once they decide to celebrate the Nativity, which occurs in the 300s, it's chiefly chiefly a church function.
Mm.
It's a time for the first of the Christmas sermons to begin. But almost at the same time starts appearing festive elements,
Mm.
the giving of gifts, for example. And Christmas in the late 300s and for the rest of its existence takes on the aspects of a midwinter festival, with gifts, feasting, greenery, and light.
Mhm. So, one of the things I found interesting in the book, among others, was the whole issue of December 25 and how that date was set. Can you tell us more about how that was established?
Yes, there's no indication in the New Testament, clearer indication of the time of year when Jesus was born. And for a long time, historians said it must have been an attempt to either co-opt the pagan midwinter festivals,
Hmm.
like the Roman Saturnalia and Bromelia and the New Year, or perhaps to hide Christian celebrations in an empire that was persecuting them.
Hmm.
Um, that was called the history of religions theory. But most historians, I would say the last 20 or 30 years, have shifted to what's called the calculation theory. And it's really an interesting um, and rather complex approach to the problem.
Hmm.
The birth in midwinter occurs 9 months after what would have been roughly the time of the crucifixion of Jesus, and the beginning of spring. In the ancient world, it was held that great men like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Jesus of Nazareth, are born and die on the same date. Now, if that's the case, then we can say that Jesus would have been born at the time of his crucifixion, which is a debatable period, but it certainly occurs in the spring. So let's say March 25th, which would have been the start of spring. Christians then said, well, what occurs on March 25th is the conception of Jesus, the conception by the power of the Holy Spirit, accepted by the Virgin Mary. So 9 months after March 25th comes December 25th.
Hmm.
This fits in with the cosmic notions of the time of year in which God created the world. So the birth of Jesus is likened to the birth of the planet Earth and life on planet Earth. Obviously, God began the world not in winter, but in spring,
Hmm.
when everything is green and new. So those kinds of metaphors led people to believe that Jesus was conceived on March 25th, and then born on December 25th. So,
Interesting. Wow. So it has great significance, but we're not quite sure.
well, there's a passage in which John the Baptist says of himself, at the time of the summer solstice,
Hmm.
he must increase and I must decrease. So again, summer solstice, winter solstice. Then there's the calculation of the service of John the Baptist's father
Hmm.
in the temple.
Right.
The first nativity miracle in the New Testament is not the conception of Jesus, it's the conception of John the Baptist to an elderly couple.
Hmm.
And some very ingenious biblical scholars, much more ingenious than I, have calculated that the term of Zechariah to serve in the temple,
Hmm.
when the angel appears to him and tells him that his very aged wife is going to conceive, occurred in September. And if that's the case, then you add on 9 months for
Right.
John the Baptist, and then Mary meets John's mother in what's known as a visitation, and
Hmm.
summer, 9 months. December 25th, hooray!
Isn't that interesting? Wow. That's fascinating
It
background, Gerry.
is a curious thing. The problem is that the churches in the West used a different date for Easter,
Hmm.
than the churches in the East.
Right.
So we've got churches in Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem celebrating the Nativity on January 6th,
Hmm.
using exactly the same numerical
Hmm.
calculations, but just a different date for Easter. So that's the big tussle at the end of the 300s, is getting the Eastern Church in line with the Western Church.
Well,
And
okay.
eventually they all come around except Armenia, which to this day celebrates Christmas on January 6th.
Fascinating. So moving ahead to the year 404, as I recall, with our friend Saint Augustine. What did Saint Augustine have to say about Christmas, Gerry?
Well, he thought it was a good thing.
Hmm.
he, he thought that the emphasis on the physical um, part of Jesus's birth coincided with all kinds of virtues that the church was trying to emphasize.
Hmm.
The um, the poverty, the the love of God in coming in the form not of a king, an emperor, but as a tiny child, a
Hmm.
helpless child, a child of a family that was soon on the run.
Hmm.
The whole notion of social inversion, of the world turned upside down, starts to be emphasized by the church.
So that was obviously Saint Augustine was obviously a very significant thinker, theologian within church history. Um, and speaking of early Christians, have Christians always been concerned that there were all kinds of other pagan influences that would take away from the meaning of Christmas?
Absolutely. That's one of the first sort of complaints about Christmas occurs right in the year 400 by a bishop named Asterius,
Hmm.
who's complaining that the pagan midwinter festivals not creep into Christianity.
Hmm.
Things like putting up greenery or dancing in the streets, making noises, celebrating. Christians celebration should be sober. If they were going to give money, they should be giving it to widows and orphans instead of spending it on on food and drink or going to a play. The problem is that that kind of meshing is inescapable. It creeps into Christianity and is sanctified. Our celebration becomes less carnal, much more joyous, uh, so that when we feast, we do it in Thanksgiving. When we sing wonderful songs
Hmm.
about the Nativity. When we visit our neighbors, we spread that kind of joy at the birth of Jesus. So Christmas has become a world phenomenon in a way that, let's say, Easter or Pentecost, almost more than equally important to the Nativity, is not,
Hmm.
because the celebration of the Nativity has taken on those aspects of festival and delight that every culture that exists in a temperate climate does at midwinter. It's the coldest time of the year, so you want heat and light. It's the barest time of the year, so you want to surround yourself with greenery. It is at least in the ancient and medieval world, it's an agricultural dead spot.
Hmm.
There's not much work to be done, but all the crops are in, the beer has been brewed, the wine is in the casks, sausages are hanging from the rafters. Let's eat. So the consumption, festivity has been there almost from the beginning.
Okay, so Christmas is certainly a joyous time of year. What would you say, and I know that you are a person of Christian faith, what would you say then is at the heart of Christmas, the meaning of Christmas, if you will? I know that you reference things like social inversion as an example,
Mhm.
but what's at the heart and meaning of Christmas?
Well, Christmas is celebrated around the world on two levels. One is the Christian.
Hmm.
Um, But that story is so full of magic that the magic leaks into the secular, the materialist aspect of things, and that to me is the wonderment of it. You've got an absolutely fabulous story. You've got angels appearing to the strangest people, an elderly couple, and he says she's going to give birth, and he talks back to the angel, and the angel gets mad
Mhm.
and says, "You know what you know who you're talking to? I stand next to God. You shut up." And he has to be mute for months, talking to foreign astrologers in different lands, telling them that something is going to be happening in Bethlehem. You better get on your camel and start moving. Angels appear to a bunch of lowlifes in the hills, shepherds who are the lowest form of employed life. They're so dirty and ill thought of that their testimony doesn't count in court.
Yeah.
And that's who God sends the first message to.
Yeah.
Um, and then, they don't send them off to Herod's palace. There's an animal shelter in a nearby town. And the sky full of more angels than ever, magical stars, more prophetic dreams running away. It's just a fabulous story. And at the heart of it is this baby. Incredible thought that the creator of the universe, the master and sustainer of the cosmos, who creates galaxies with a twitch of his eyebrow, is coming to Earth in the shape of the most helpless infant. Can't control his bowels, can't control his limbs.
Yeah. Wow.
At the mercy of a baffled young couple. From that point, everything leaks out, and all the stories of Christmas thereafter are stories of miracles. Stories, for example, of St. Nicholas, which merge into stories of Santa, or
Mhm.
of all the various saints that bring gifts, of flying reindeer. But none of that's possible unless we rewind to that moment in Bethlehem in which God appears in the form of a baby.
Indeed.
You know,
So if we kind of move towards more the modern sensibility of what Christmas is about, was there a time in history, Gerry, when we could look back and say, yeah, those are when those things that we recognize today started happening? Like you referenced like gift giving and, the gathering of family and a joyous atmosphere. When did that really start taking hold then?
they all drop in at different points in history. The gift giving, right away. It's the Magi bring gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We see it in the late 300s with theologians who are now saints giving each other gifts. For a long time, though, there was no magical gift bringer. And certainly there was no magical gift bringer for children. That appears around the year 1200. With St. Nicholas. So gifts for children start appearing then. The Christmas tree pops in the 1500s, starts getting decorated in the 1600s. The notion of homecoming, of familyness, doesn't really appear until the 19th century with the emergence of railways.
Oh.
Because up to that time, in the winter, if you're separated from your family, your daughter's a servant, your kid's working on a farm somewhere, impossible for them to come home. So the homecoming nature really only starts in the 19th century. That's when the consumption changes from an emphasis on food and drink to manufactured products, because that coincides with the Industrial Revolution, and as well as new ideas about the role of children in the family. They become less important economically, and childhood now develops into a special privileged time. So these things pop in and out. The stockings appear quite early. But among the first things to appear in stockings are things that don't appear anymore, like
Mhm.
switches or coal. We don't threaten our kids with beatings anymore. Um, Reindeer appear in 1821. Anyway, yeah. So there's a whole list of things that accrete to become the modern Christmas.
So what about the significance of Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas? When did that
Yeah.
character arrive on the scene?
Well, St. Nicholas has his day on December 6th. And in the Middle Ages, he was the most important saint next to the Virgin Mary. He's been demoted down the calendar now. But at the time, more people had him as his patron saint than any other male saint. Whole countries, whole industries had him. And he was also the patron saint of children. He had several of his miracles involved children. So at some point around the year 1200, in what we think is France,
Mhm.
um, what we believe are nuns start giving little gifts to children in their care on St. Nicholas Day.
Mm.
And from around 1200 on, children now have a magical gift bringer. And he will eventually dominate the magical gift bringer scene for hundreds of years until the Protestant Reformation, in which saints are given the boot and he has to be replaced.
Mm.
Parents love the notion of a magical gift bringer, but if it can't be a saint, who can it be? The baby Jesus,
Okay.
the Christ child, das
Mhm.
Christkind, le petit Jésus. So we now have competing magical gift bringers depending on the area in Europe and the denomination.
Interesting. So just can you explain, I know you do in your book a little bit, but Saint Nicholas, why was he such a prominent saint and then why was he demoted, so to
St.
speak?
Nicholas was a bishop in the Eastern Roman Empire, in what's now Turkey, in the 300s.
Mhm.
He had a brief notoriety for appearing at the Council of Nicaea and smacking around a heretic. He seems to have been one of the first people to have been declared a saint for his holy life rather than his martyrdom.
Mm.
And so the corpus of legends around him grows. He has magical powers. He can fly. So he's famous for rescuing sailors caught in storms at sea.
Mhm.
He becomes the patron saint of sailors. He saves people from unjust execution. He rescues daughters from prostitution by secretly throwing bags of gold in to provide their dowries. He resuscitates 3 boys who have been murdered and chopped up and pickled in a barrel, about to be cannibalized. So a big saint in the Middle Ages, and something that even Martin Luther appreciated. He kept the Saint Nicholas tradition for his children, though eventually he disappears from most Protestant countries.
Mm.
What's important, though, is that he is brought to North America. He comes with the Dutch settlers who settle what's now New York,
Mhm.
particularly up the Hudson River Valley. And there he is known as Sinterklaas,
Mhm.
Dutch for St. Nicholas.
Right.
And English Americans adopt Sinterklaas, Sandy Claw, Santa Claus,
Mm.
in the early 1800s as the magical gift bringer.
Yeah. No, it's just fascinating the evolution of these things in culture and time. And speaking of an aside, you can see I'm wearing a so-called candy cane
Indeed, you
tie.
are.
So, Gerry, you know everything about Christmas. So, what is there meaning to the candy cane?
The
Or
candy cane. If you go on some Christian websites today, you will read that the candy cane is really an inverted J for Jesus,
Oh.
and that the stripes are his blood and so on.
Ah, I
None
see.
of that is
Yeah.
true. That's what we call retrojection,
Okay.
where you go back and you grab something and you give it the meaning that you want. Candy canes seem to have appeared in the 1600s in Germany when a choir master in charge of a bunch of very unruly boys got tired of hitting them and started giving them candy canes to munch on to keep them civilized behavior. The red and white striping is a candy making technique that doesn't come in until the 19th century. And becomes even more developed in the 20th century.
Who
So
knew? Who
they're
knew?
originally just plain candy.
That's interesting. So, speaking of other groups, what did the Puritans have to say about Christmas?
They didn't like it. These most religious of all Protestants decided in the 1550s that any festival, any celebration at all that didn't get official sanction in the Bible was idolatrous, meaning it was made by man, not God.
Right.
So they threw out Easter and Pentecost and Christmas.
Wow.
And in countries where the Puritans reigned supreme, such as Scotland, parts of Switzerland, England for a period of 20 years, and New England, there was no Christmas celebration at all. In fact, it was against the law to celebrate Christmas or to sing Christmas carols,
Wow.
or to have a church service on a Christmas that wasn't a Sunday.
That's amazing. Gosh, no candy canes for the Puritans.
No, indeed.
So, one of the fascinating parts of the book that was quite interesting was the whole debasement of Christmas. Like, there was a period where it became kind of drunken brawls and things like this. It's almost hard to imagine.
Yeah.
So, what happened there, Gerry?
We just mentioned that the Puritans had banned Christmas in England during the 1640s and 1650s. When Christmas was reinstated with the return of the monarchy, it had gone down market. It became a celebration.
Sorry, you said down market?
Down market.
Okay.
Yeah. Aristocrats weren't celebrating it much anymore. It used to be a time of charity, of dispensing generosity to your tenants. They dropped all that. No more free beer, no more free bread for the tenants at Christmas. And it was a rural thing. It was a time for a drunken blowout, singing, carousing. And by the 1700s, it had got even worse. We can see this in London by looking at the newspaper. It's hardly mentioned at all, Christmas, except on the criminal courts page, where people are hauled before the judge for drunken brawling. In cities in the United States, there are drunken gangs who appropriate the holiday. They swagger down the streets and they beat up on immigrants or African Americans, make noises outside of churches, have bang, 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 ugly music. And it was the desire of some intellectuals and artists in New York in the early 1800s to rescue Christmas, to bring Christmas indoors, to take the booze out of it, and to focus it on Christmas, that saves Christmas in North America. Out of that movement, we get the invention of Santa Claus. We get the poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." In England, we get Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, emphasizing the charitable aspect, the family aspect of it. We've got carol collectors going into the boonies and rescuing songs that were no longer sung in the cities. We've got church reformers saying, let's decorate our churches, let's be festive again. And all of this takes time, but in the 1800s is a time of rescuing Christmas. The Puritans are still against it. People of Puritan mind are still against it. And there's an Anglican church in England that had to hand out brass knuckles to its congregation to keep the Christmas decorations from being busted up by hostile ultra-Protestant
No
mobs.
kidding. Wow.
You know, and we still get that.
Yeah.
We still have pockets of very vigorous Calvinist opposition to
Gosh.
Christmas.
So there's always these interesting cultural swirls around Christmas and trends, but also debates within Christian faith about how Christmas should be marked. And so you refer
Yeah.
to a lot of that movement to bring Christmas back in a positive way as did you call them the revivers? Is that right?
Yeah, in the 19th century, there are people involved in the revival of Christmas.
Wow.
The translators of ancient songs that become the Christmas carols that we sing today. Uh,
Okay.
People like John Neal in England, or Christina Whitworth. Anyway, she translates all the wonderful German stuff. New songs are being sung. Um, the the charitable aspect is reinfused
Mm-hmm.
into Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of groups spring up to provide Christmas meals, Christmas heat
Mm-hmm.
uh, to families. These are the ones that save Christmas, reinfuse it, um, add meanings to it, and make Christmas this powerful global force that, of course, engenders opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you have a different view in mind for humans, you're going to want to do away with Christmas. And
Mm-hmm.
so, communists, fascists, social democrats are all targeting Christmas. Atheists
Yes.
target Christmas. Vegetarians
Okay.
target Christmas. It's a turkey holocaust.
Okay.
So, yeah, the 20th century is a time of epic battles
Right.
for the survival of
Yeah, no,
Christmas.
I found those chapters to be fascinating. Basically, how you have these tyrants come on the scene and basically want to push Christmas aside for their own
Well,
reasons, right?
well,
Like,
they have to.
yeah,
You can't have a big segment of the population proclaiming God came to Earth to save us, and we should be happy about that.
yeah,
If you don't believe in God,
right.
and you want peasants not to be celebrating, but to working on fulfilling the tractor quota for the next 5-year plan.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Why
communists,
would you want to tell the Christmas story?
well, exactly. So uh, Chinese communists go at it hard. Russian communists go at it hard.
Hmm.
Fascists take a different approach. They understand that Christmas is embedded deeply into, for example, German culture.
Hmm.
So what Hitler and his boys try to do is to pervert Christmas,
Hmm.
to turn it away from December 25th to the winter solstice, the pagan celebration on December 21st.
Hmm.
And Adolf Hitler, they still sing Silent Night, but you don't mention Jesus, you mention Adolf Hitler.
Isn't that
Uh,
bizarre?
yeah, you don't mention Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas. You have older figures from German pagan mythology.
Right, right.
It's they don't use Weihnachten,
Hmm.
for example, Fröhliche Weihnachten, Happy Christmas. It's Fröhliche Julfest, using Yule, the ancient word for Christmas.
No, it's really creepy. In the book, you have a picture of a Christmas card of all things. And of course, the Nazis hated Christianity, but he did put out a Christmas card, and of course, the emphasis is on him.
Yes.
So yeah, no, it's pretty creepy. Um, so today we have a lot of groups that all want to kind of get their word in edgewise around Christmas, and you have some really interesting slides there. Even the PETA people, the people that are for pets' rights
Right.
have a kind of an angle on Christmas. It seems like everybody's kind of all over Christmas, even
Well,
today.
Christmas is sacred and popular. So if you're outside of Christianity and you want a message,
Hmm.
the thing to do is to horn in on Christmas,
Right.
to attack it or to jujitsu, use its momentum to help you. So yeah, the PETA also always appears at Christmas because they're vegetarians, and they'll publish wonderful descriptions of the beauty that is the face of a turkey.
No, it's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah,
Now, if you think about fast forward to today, it is really quite interesting. I did take some time this week to read an interesting report that came out from the Canadian Human Rights Commission, of all things.
oh,
And yes, Gerry, I'm sorry to put this on the table. I read the report, and basically it was hammering away at both Christmas and Easter. And
yeah,
it's stunning because during this tragic time where there's been these Hamas terrorist attacks and anti-Semitism in Canada and around the world, the Human Rights Commission, I think, has been utterly silent. But they did weigh in on their report on this time, on when it came to Christmas and Easter. Were you surprised by that? They were basically
no,
calling it.
no,
I
that
can.
they've been at it for decades. I thought that it had peaked. There was a peak of this kind of nonsense in the early 21st century. Judges began to ban Christmas trees from courthouses.
Mhm.
Professors started complaining about Christmas trees in museums, that they were anti-immigrant, that they told people you didn't belong.
Right, right.
Um, what this is part of is not an attack on Christmas so much as it's an attack on public religion,
Mm,
Christianity in particular. They
mhm,
want a naked public square.
mhm,
They want to strip faith from anything that has to do with the public. They
mhm.
don't want Christmas trees in airports. They don't want buses with signs that say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Um, they want an utterly secular marketplace. So you can have it in your home, you can have it in church, that's where it belongs. But God, if there were a God, God forbid that it should appear on the side of a bus or in a public park.
Wow. But isn't the paradox that it sounds like some in the public square or in broader society, and I know that we have the freedom to believe what we want to believe, have perhaps adopted, dare I say, a secular religion?
Well, it's very paradoxical because what we have is that for the sake of inclusion and diversity, we're suppressing the majority culture. That has never seemed to make sense to me, but it makes perfect sense to the diversicrats,
Hmm.
the umbrage industry, this army of um, people who inhabit our school districts, universities, governments, unions, corporations. They're
Wow.
everywhere, telling us that there must be no mention of a god, that your decorations in a public office must be entirely um, anodyne. It, it goes so far at some universities to ban red and green as winter festival decorations.
Gosh.
So no more Christmas pageants. We now have winter festival. Um, yeah,
Gerry, all I can say
the
is
book is full of examples. Yeah,
they need to read Charles Dickens' brilliant book from 1833 called A Christmas Carol, and maybe they
yeah.
could relax a bit and enjoy the season. Um, so, as we look to the real meaning of Christmas, do you have any tips to people, our viewers, as we anticipate Christmas and how they can best drink in this special time of year?
I got a million tips.
Okay.
Um, the first is you're allowed to enjoy yourself. Christmas is not Lent. Christmas is a feast. So enjoy yourself. It's often a time of stress. There's a million ways to reduce that stress. I always start planning for Christmas months ahead of time, make agreements with your family, where we're going to celebrate, how we're going to celebrate, when we're going to open the presents, how long kids have to wait in bed before they get up and open their stockings, how they are not allowed to open Christmas presents under the tree until they've had a decent breakfast in them, and so on. Infuse charity into your season. This is the number one time for public attention to Christianity. Let's make people know for sure that Christians are the loving and giving people, that we are grateful for the gifts we've been given. We're going to share them. Sing, bring back carolers going from house to house. Make sure that those outside the family get a taste of your Christmas. Christmas in the West is a time when we bunker up, when we exclude. Well, that's one of the signs that you're in the in-group is if you're in the Christmas inner circle. Expand that circle. Get people who might be single or widowed, refugees, visitors. Make sure they have a taste of the good times. Remember, December 25th is the first day of Christmas, not the last day.
Indeed.
Christmas is a season. There's Advent for preparation. There's the 12 days of Christmas for celebration, right up until Epiphany. And I could go on and on about the need to revive Epiphany too, but we'll save that for another podcast.
Well said. Dr. Gerry Bowler, thank you so much for joining us today and bringing, dare I say, the spirit of Christmas to our discussion today.
Well, I hope so. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Merry Christmas to you, and thank you again.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.